So today Razer announced two brand new gaming laptops, the Razer Blade 16 and the Razer Blade 18. I'm cool with this. I've always wanted a 16-inch version of the 15-inch model, but the kicker is they're transitioning to a 16:10 aspect ratio. Now granted, they're not really deviating from the design. Like you've used a Razer Blade laptop before, it's gonna pretty much look identical. It's gonna light up with the green snakes on the back and it's gonna be a full CNC aluminum chassis. But there's not much of a difference in terms of what you get between the 18 and the 16-inch version. For example, both of these laptops will have very identical ports. On the left-hand side, you're gonna have the power connector, a USB-A 3.2, a Type-C port, which will be Thunderbolt 4, and a combo audio jack. The big difference though, is that on the 18-inch model, you get an RJ45 port. It's gonna be 2.5 gigabits. So if you want that port, you gotta go with the 18 because the 16 is not going to offer it. There's no ports on the back, but on the right-hand side, both laptops have an SD card slot, Type-C, so only one Thunderbolt 4 port on both laptops, USB-A, and an HDMI port. Now here's the thing, Razer is introducing their GaN chargers. So if you buy a model with the 4060 or 4070, that's gonna be using a 280 watt GaN charging brick. If you buy a version with the 4080 or 4090, it's gonna be using a 330 watt charging brick. These charging bricks are massive. I'm happy Razer is using GaN chargers because it's gonna take the weight distribution, lower it, and make it a little bit more easier to carry these things around. Now granted, if you don't want to carry these big charging bricks, if you're taking these things to school, these Type-C ports will offer power delivery up to 100 watts, so you can obviously travel with something much lighter. Now weight distribution is obviously different. If you buy the Blade 16, you're looking at 5.4 pounds, which is obviously heavier than the previous Razer Blade 15. I would have loved if they could keep it under 5 pounds, but unfortunately due to the heat and the power of these GPUs and CPUs, they need bigger chassis, right? It just needs to stay cooled properly. And if you go for the Blade 18, it stays around 7 pounds, which is pretty much identical to the previous Razer Blade 17. Now granted, if you're really into external sound, the Blade 18 is gonna have 6 speakers, but you'll only get 4 on the Razer Blade 16. Now opening up the laptop will continue to be easy by using one hand, and you're gonna have that very familiar keyboard to type on. It's gonna be 1.1 millimeters of travel distance. You're gonna have a massive glass touchpad. The keys are gonna be full of RGB, and obviously it's gonna be per key RGB, so you can customize each and every one to whatever color you want. But the displays are gonna be the focal point of this laptop. Now, if you do buy the Razer Blade 16, it's gonna have an actual shutter at the top where you can just like physically close the webcam. Both of these devices are gonna have infrared sensors, so you can visually use your beautiful mug to log into your laptop. But the 18 will not have a shutter, and probably because I imagine most people will be buying the 18 to use as a desktop replacement, whereas more people will be using the webcam on the 16 because it's lighter and easier to travel with. Now, the display options are fantastic. If you buy the 16-inch version, you are gonna have a mini LED option. And you can get it anywhere from a QHD display all the way down to full HD. Obviously continuing with that 16:10 aspect ratio, and you have the potential of a high refresh rate all the way up to 240 Hertz. Now if you go with the 18-inch model, there's no mini LED, so forget about it. But all of the options are at least QHD, and they do have a couple of 4K panels if you want something a bit more pixel dense. So regardless of whether you buy the Blade 16 or 18, the specs will be identical. They're both using i9-13950HX Intel CPUs. These are unlocked, super powerful, but the GPU options differ depending on the SKU you buy. They all come with a 4060, 4070, 4080, or a 4090. And if you opt for the 4060 or 4070, the TGP tops out at 140 watts. If you go for the 4080 or 4090, regardless of chassis, that tops out at 175 watts. Now you can get this with up to 32 gigabytes of RAM, but of course it's upgradable to 64, DDR5, 4800 megahertz, and the display option really comes down to your own personal preferences, but you will get a very fast Gen 4 NVMe SSD, and both models include an extra slot if you want to increase the storage. Now this is not going to be a cheap laptop. I don't have prices, but this is Razer. They're boutique. They create these beautiful, gorgeous products, so expect this to be very, very expensive. Now, even though they share very similar specs, I still think the Blade 18 is gonna be a little bit faster. Let's be honest here. There's more fans inside, it has a bigger chassis, so cooling should technically be better. When you have better cooling, when this processor or the GPU tops out, it can sustain that performance for a bit longer. These Intel CPUs are expected to perform anywhere from 10 to 12% faster when it comes to single core clock speeds, and anywhere from 30 to 40% when it comes to multi-core speeds. I don't know how much better these 40 series GPUs are in laptops, but if it's anything like the desktops, this is gonna be a nice performance bump compared to last year's GPUs. Just like previous Razer Blades, it will be easy to open up, it will be easy to upgrade, RAM will be upgradable, drives will be upgradable, Wi-Fi will be upgradable, but the difference though internally comes down to the battery size. One would think with the Razer Blade 18 that you're getting the biggest battery, but that's not the case. Because just like the Blade 17, Razer is using a third fan where the battery is located. That means they have to split the battery into two, and when you do that, you lose a little bit of battery life. So you're looking at a 90 to 92 watt hour battery in the Blade 18 and a 95 watt hour battery in the Blade 16. Personally, I think this is a wise choice because let's be honest here, most people are not traveling with their 7-pound laptops to get the best battery life. I'd rather have the better battery life in the Blade 16 because that's the one I'd be more likely to travel with. Plus, the extra cooling is more than warranted because for most people, this Blade 18 is going to be a desktop replacement. There's also one thing in the marketing materials I noticed. It says ambient noise 50 decibels. I'm assuming that at max load, the loudest that these laptops will get will be 50 decibels. Now, some of you might be saying, that's really loud, Matt. Well, it's not, because for gaming laptops, it usually averages around 53 to 55 decibels when these things are under full load. So if Razer can keep it at 50, this is definitely an improvement. Now, granted, I'm mostly excited for the Razer Blade 16. This is a product I have been waiting for Razer to make for years. Having that 16:10 display, the SD card slot, the same performance as the bigger 18-inch version is something I've always wanted. Of course, I'll be reviewing both of these laptops, so make sure you get subscribed to see that. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.